that would be no problem. It would be easy to do. In fact, in some ways, I had to restrain myself and keep with the parallelism of the document to not go further. As Senator Jackson and Senator Sherman know, I can go on and on about both the needs within our dairy industry and how the dairy stabilization program has helped. So I can easily provide that kind of detail.
Well, and maybe an appendix is the place to put it. I don't know, but anyway, I think it would be used if you did come up with that.
Well, thank you, John, and you don't have to apologize for going on and on, because you definitely know what you're talking about, and it's much needed. Senator Sherman.
John, thank you also. I think I'd like to have you go astray a little bit, not too far.
Sure.
I had the question about Canada being involved in this, and of course you got the, I won't say the throwaway line here about Canada and Europe have made some sort of agreement. And it kind of startled me, because as you know, Canada supports the dairy industry to the nth degree over there.
Yes.
And it'd be, and especially Quebec and New Brunswick. And I wonder if there's any hint of if that agreement with Canada's been done in some ways, and if they did protect their dairy, because they're, again, about almost twice the price per hundredweight as Maine is, which is great for us because Canadians come over here to buy milk. That's one of the big things. They used to hide out in the cars that were going back. But I wonder if you could speak to that.
Well, Senator Sherman, I don't know an awful lot about exactly how the Canadian government supports their dairy industry. It's obviously through a different system than the federal order system, and I think a lot of it is direct supports that farmers get for infrastructure, and of course healthcare is included, and a whole bunch of other things that make their cost of production lower. I don't know the detail, but my point would be you're absolutely right. Canada does that a lot, and that may lead you to think that, well, any North American EU agreement would necessarily embrace that and keep that alive, and so we might be okay. But I again go back to Senator Patrick's point, which is that is something that will have the Canadian system would have the full force of the Canadian delegation behind it. And the problem with what Maine has done is we're one small voice in the wilderness here. So I think it's really important that we make it clear to everyone that we can that the ways we've done things have been really useful, and it doesn't probably affect the overall supply of milk in the United States by more than 0.5%, but it makes a huge difference for the agricultural economy of Maine. So I just think we have to keep hitting on that. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Well, I think it's in the ballpark, and they're subsidized to tune about $40 a hundredweight.
Yes,
that would scare you to death.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Dr. Case.
John, this is Joel Case. Thank you very much for your comments. I think you have certainly helped me understand a little bit more about this very complex process and policy. In the report, you compared our system in Maine and with an example of Vermont, where Vermont, yes, I believe you said, produces about 6 times what they consume in the dairy industry, whereas in Maine, we, for the most part, consume what we produce.
We consume similar to the amount that we produce. There's quite a bit of milk that goes out, and then quite a bit of other dairy products, including fluid milk that flows in. But in average, the consumption in state is pretty similar to the production in state. That's correct.
So, given that set of circumstances, and looking at the importance of the state system we have in place that meets our needs, and the concern that I would have being looked at from the perspective of a prospective international treaty, not having a great deal of concern about 1 out of 50 states and how we meet our own needs. I wonder, is there some barrier to expansion of production and expansion of trade because of the current system that's in place? Again, going back to saying that because what's coming in and what's going out, we're meeting our own needs, is that essentially creating an artificial barrier to potential expansion of trade in the dairy industry for the state?
That's a great question, and I can understand how one might think that. But the answer is no. First off, Maine is potentially a really good place to make milk. It's cool, it's wet. We grow grass well, which is with the grain that's used is the principal thing that cattle eat, and we're close to markets. So we could grow dairy here potentially were it not for the issues of federal pricing. I think it's less an issue of exporting internationally. I think it's more a matter of if federal pricing was different, Maine would be better positioned to serve some East Coast markets than potentially some of the milk from the West Coast that often currently does. The comment that I made that our program works because there's a rough balance, if the balance was off 10, 15, 20, 50%, it still would work. There's nothing about the balance that says it's in or it's out. It just makes it more effective if there's a close balance. And the reason is this. The funding source that keeps this program alive is a handling tax, and that handling tax needs to be applied to all the milk handled in the state of Maine. So as a result, if you were producing, as Vermont does, 6 times more milk than the amount you're handling in the state because it's flowing over into other states, again, as it does in Vermont. And by the way, Maine has a greater agricultural activity than Vermont, but Maine is about 20% dairy, whereas Vermont is about 80% dairy. So that's why there's this difference. But under the current federal milk marketing system, when Vermont is selling all that milk out of the state, if there was a handling tax in place, it would only apply to the milk on the shelves in Vermont. And they would be such a small percentage that you'd have to raise $1 of tax to get benefit flowing back to the farmer that was only worth 1/6 of that. So there's no structural problem. You could still do that. It's just the benefit would be far less. So get out of your mind that you need the balance in order to have a system to like that work. You don't need it, and there's absolutely nothing in having that system that prevents us from making more milk. They're totally disconnected. But the bottom line is, nonetheless, if there is a state that exports, and I don't mean international exports, but Vermont shipping to Massachusetts, New York, et cetera, if there is a state that produces a lot more milk than is consumed in-state, you would never create a program like this because you're creating a program where only a small portion of the tax benefits that you're assigning can really flow back with full value to the farmer. So that was a little disjointed, and I apologize, but let me try to summarize it this way. Point one, there's nothing that's preventing Maine from making more milk in the state system. What's preventing it is the federal market order system with pricing that is often below the cost of production. That's point one. Point two, if Maine was producing 2 or 3 times more milk, would the state system, the dairy stabilization system, be less productive? Yes. But it wouldn't matter, because if it was producing that milk, it would mean there were markets for it outside of the state at the federal prices, so we wouldn't need the program as much.
I was curious as to how, and I'm sure, John, there'll be probably some questions from the audience, so I'll get to that in just a second. Tariffs on wood fiber, paper, how might that be affected, and had you run into that at all? I know you were talking about some of the countries with lobster and stuff like that, but I was thinking about exporting of chips, pellets here in Maine, how that might, if you ran into that, or?
I didn't, but what I can do, and what we decided to focus on were the things that were already being exported or imported to the top exports, but I can certainly look that up, and if there are other products that people are interested in, we can certainly look that up and include it, perhaps a more extensive list in the appendix of different products of interest.
Well, I was thinking like paper, finished paper, and also pulp. I guess some of the paper mills now just produce the pulp and then ship these too. So both those things are certainly really important to the state. Wade?
I'm driving my staff crazy right now. Seed potatoes, 4.5%, and broccoli, 13.6%, or 1.6 euros per 100 kilograms. And I just asked him for wood chips and pulp and paper too. So I think we got it covered, Karen. But it's going to, so I'm driving them insane right now. They were like, why do you keep asking us these questions? So if I get an update, I'll let you know. Yes,
Make sure
absolutely.
that Karen gets that report.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
definitely.
Dr. Case?
I know that we had decided to have a specific area of focus for Karen and John in preparing this information. But as we kind of broaden some of the discussion, does it make sense to have, for example, an appendix that talks about the 10 most important import-export products in the state, just, as a suggestion?
Hi, Karen, I think this is for you. In the report, you mentioned there was an alternative methodology for the organics. How is the dispute resolution handled in there? If there was a change in the FDA process or the EU process, how would they go about resolving that, or can they?
I'd have to look into the specifics. What I know is there was this process to determine the equivalency of U.S. and EU organic standards on particular issues. And I know just recently there was negotiations on some particular subtopic, so it's an evolving process. But I can certainly look into that. It's something, I'm very interested to learn more about that process because I think it is functioning pretty well from what I hear. But I'll look into that.
Representative Treat?
Just a quick comment on that. I think one of the things that would make that very helpful information to have in the report, from a point of view of using the report, is to be able to sit down with USTR and say, maybe there's some other ways to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve that don't have the negative effects. And we're not just saying no to something here, we're offering you an alternative that is functioning in another part of the agricultural field. And that may be relevant to other things beyond agriculture. So that's partly why I also am very interested in that.
I think we're going to invite testimony from the audience. So with that, if anyone wants to make any suggestions, questions, or anything of the draft report, please step right up. Tell us what your question is, and we'll try and answer it.
My name's Ron Hemingway, and I'm from Western Maine. I live in Dixfield, and I represent workers at the paper mill at the New Page Paper Mill in Rumford. I have about 700 members, and there's probably about 900 or so employees there. And I also do some state work within USW as well, and represent other people throughout the state. I guess my question is, I guess I didn't fully understand everything that was going on today and what the purpose of the hearing was. I was actually here more to give testimony on trade in general, not just in the topic that we're hearing about today. So what I was saying is, I don't know if there's a better time for me to testify after this, after other people want to talk, because I think I'm the only one that signed up so far to talk, so, but.
No, I think that's definitely appropriate to have her hear the issues that's why I brought up pulp and paper. Wasn't sure if you were actually gonna speak about it or not, but,
Well, I plan to, yes,
Yeah.
actually, it's a great concern for me.
just
And,
another treat.
Yes,
I thought it would answer your initial question. Okay, just to answer your initial question, because people may be listening in also and want to know, the commission is required every 2 years to do an assessment on the impacts of trade on the state of Maine. And we actually haven't been given a very large budget to do that. So what we decided to do this year and in some previous years is to focus that assessment on particular topics. So the previous assessment 2 years ago was focused on issues of procurement, pharmaceuticals, and something else, tobacco. And this one, we had a public hearing that focused on specifically food and agriculture issues, and there was a lot of interest in that, especially relating to this new agreement. So we decided to do the assessment on those agriculture issues and this European Union agreement. But that said, I'm totally with the Senate Chair in terms of hearing, any comments that you might have relating to trade. This is our public hearing, and we're also required to have at least 2 or 3 public hearings, 2 public hearings a year, and this is one of our public hearings, so we're always anxious to hear from the public on any topic relating to trade.
And I think that why I thought it was appropriate too is I think Ms. Taylor would agree that some of this stuff falls under agriculture and a lot of the USDOL laws too, so as far as harvesting and all that, so I mean, it seems to me to be very appropriate because we're really probably not 100% sure if the wood fiber would maybe fall under the agricultural exemption anyway, so so with that, by all means, please go ahead.
thank you. Okay, I also appeared before this commission a few years ago, and I was here more related to paper and the paper case. We've experienced a lot of paper dumping in Maine and across the U.S. Mainly it comes more from places like China and Indonesia. Part of what I want to talk about is it's very unfortunate that the government negotiates these trade agreements, and a lot of it is behind closed doors, and we don't know what's in it. So it takes us several years to find out what's going on. In the meantime, there's a lot of pressure on the pricing in the paper market because places like China and Indonesia are dumping their products on us. So the USW and, at the time, New Page had to get together and spend quite a bit of money to bring forward to the federal government a case in front of the Department of Commerce to say that they're dumping paper on us and they're hurting our businesses and putting us out of work and closing paper mills, which has a lot of other fallout in the chemical, wood supply business and all the other industries. And why should we be spending millions of dollars to fight these trade agreements when it's the government that negotiates them? I would think we would put it in that the trade agreements should involve that the government should have to pay for any of these battles that we have to have, especially when we win them. We won ours in the paper segment, but what is also unfortunate is it's a very narrow scope that you're allowed to fight in. In the paper industry, there's many grades of paper, and within those grades of paper, you have to determine what grades of paper, if it's groundwood free, what weight, if it's coated, uncoated, colored paper, all these different grades that we make but you can only fight that in one specific category. And when you do, the country like China or other rogue nations that don't care about the trade agreements, they want you to sign them, but they don't want to follow them, what they will do is they just change what their product is slightly, move into a slightly different market, and now we have to start all over again to fight that same battle again. And, you know, in the meantime, by the time it takes us to put a case together and go to court and win, we've shut down more mills, we put more people out of business, we've shut down many more machines. And it's a cycle that's going on. I brought some paperwork, which I could share if you're interested, that within the USW, with the name like USW, United Steelworkers, Paperworkers, Steelworkers of America, we have many industry in there. We're not just steelworkers, we're not just paper, we're also nuclear power, we have Harley-Davidson motorcycles that are being built, we have oil and chemical, we have glass, we have cement, we have rubber tires. We've had to fight these same battles in every industry. We've had to fight them in rubber tires. You're getting a lot of imports from China again, Indonesia, I know China on tires, and put a lot of tire companies out of business. And these are all primary manufacturing jobs which supports many other jobs, many other sectors of the economy. And we're losing the middle class in the U.S., and a lot of it is because we're taking away the manufacturing base in this country. I hope what we're not doing with the European Union is we're going to go into a trade agreement to bring them down to our standards, because their standards are higher and better than ours. And I think our corporations want to use that to lower the standards there. And I think there's a lot of things we could do to help. And I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at. And I prepared a few things just for suggestions. And please be patient with me if I bore you. You've probably heard a lot of this before, and I apologize for that. But anyway, I'm saying what we need, I think, is fair trade, not free trade. We need to make sensible rules that every country plays by, and goods for those countries that are in violation should not be allowed access to those markets and the products that are produced from that. When we did win the subsidy, we won a subsidy against China. It lasts for up to 5 years. By then, they've done something else in the market, they move a little bit, and we're gonna fight that battle again. Or it's gonna be Indonesia, and now we're under pressure because we signed another trade agreement with South Korea. So South Korea is the one that is putting all the pressure on the American steel industry right now. What they're doing is they're dumping their products, their steel products, on America at below fair market prices. The governments subsidize what they do, what they build, what they manufacture, so that they can come over here, put the products in the American market, drive our companies out of business. Once we do that, those prices are going to start to rise, and the goods might not be as available. I think we need to look at that for other home security issues as well. We need fair standards of labor, no child labor, no forced labor or slave labor, or any other immoral practices that produces a race to the bottom. We don't need to get down to the average worker in China. When I looked into it a couple of years ago, we're making $100 a month in the paper making industry. We don't need to make $100 a month to compete. That is not what this should be about. We need to make sure that there isn't just wages, but there's actually a standard of benefits such as medical and retirement. Our businesses pay for this. How can we ask them to compete with other businesses in other countries that do not pay the same benefits that we pay? And I think we recognize we need those benefits like Social Security and Medicare. And it's interesting, though, there was another trade pact with Colombia that's been promoted a lot. Colombia, by the way, kills their union leaders, so they wouldn't be free to come here and speak like I can. I think my employer would love me to go down and organize in Colombia. We need protection for industry, respect of patent rights. Every small or large business that starts doing business with rogue traded partners risk losing their products and business to copyright infringement, fraud, and patent violations, copycat reproductions. We need our government to stand up for its citizens, like I said, and fight these trade cases for us. Currency manipulation, that's another place we're still losing in the paper industry. China manipulates their currency. They lower the actual rate for trade against the American dollar, and they actually peg it to our currency, though that's always lower than that. I don't think we have that same issue with European trade. I think they're probably a little more conscious of their price. China does it to be able to keep their prices artificially low. They also do predatory pricing. Illegal subsidies hurt us. Given raw materials to their own privately held or government-held owned industry, they provide free or low-cost electricity, cheap chemicals, and minerals that hurts all of us. It's another place that we can't compete in the paper industry to buy those products, and the companies we're buying the products from, American industries, can't compete because places like China are practically giving those materials away. Our manufacturing base is a primary industry. Economics 101 would actually say that you need to take something such as a raw material, add value to it, and then sell it for a price that will pay for the supplies and the labor and still make a profit. If we become just a service industry nation, our economy is going to crumble. We need to buy American when upgrading our infrastructure. We need to create a system where American goods have priority over foreign goods when taxpayer dollars are used. We need to use American labor when possible and promote American goods to the public. There was a bridge, I think it's called the Bay Bridge. You guys might know more about it than I do. But there was a Bay Bridge, a major, multi-million, billion-dollar rebuild of a bridge, I believe in California, if I remember right, but the Bay Bridge. That was made with Chinese steel. They came in, they underpriced the American product. It was behind the delivery date it was supposed to be done. It was way over budget, and then they had to come in and practically rebuild it. It ended up costing more than what it would have been done if we had used American products, American people doing the work, and it's putting our people out of business again. We need to be patriotic by protecting our economy, our troops, and our military. We need to clothe our troops with complete American-made gear. This is much larger than just New Balance sneakers. We keep hearing about New Balance sneakers, and I hope they make it. I want to protect them too. But there's more to it than just that. Their boots, their clothes, all the gear they need should be made in America. If we get into a major war, which some people want to jump into again in the Middle East and which could expand, if our suppliers don't give us the goods we need to go to war, what are we going to do? I mean, our ships, our jets, everything, that needs to be made in America. We should be supply chain ready and not relying on countries that can turn off our supplies. We recognize the need for this in petroleum products. Why don't we recognize this in everything else that is crucial to our country? As we lose our manufacturing base, we lose the middle-class jobs, the tax base that pays for education, property taxes, Social Security, and Medicare income, taxes that support the entire federal and state existence, and the driver of jobs that supports several levels of other support jobs. There's been a lot of talk about fast track. I went to Washington a few months ago. I talked to all of our delegation while there. A couple of our delegation is right on board that they will not support any fast track in any trade agreement. A couple others are more hesitant and they want to look at it. If there's fast track, that just means that we're not going to get a chance to look at it. We're not going to get a chance to debate it. We're not going to protect the American people and the economy and our business. Now I understand there's a new name for it. They're going to start bringing something else forward called smart track. It's just another, they're going to clothe it in a different mask, and they're going to try to bring it back again with a smarter sounding name. But we have to hold our delegation, to the grindstone that they will not pass anything that doesn't have full debate. We need full debate because, as you hear, just in the agriculture and the milk industry, every industry is complicated like that. We need to fully debate every industry that is affected. We need full public knowledge, and we don't want to lose our autonomy and our rights to hold companies responsible for the products that are here. We can't let a foreign body as the World Trade Association or World Trade Organization dictate what we're gonna do in the US and what we're gonna use for products, and whether or not we can bring suit against somebody that does something wrong. I thank you very much for letting me speak. I know I'm a little long-winded, but thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Hemingway. Any questions? Senator Sherman? Well, yeah, you're from Aroostook County, so I picked you.
Thanks for being here. I remember you were here some time ago, and I mentioned I had a Hemingway family in my district, and you look like one of the younger Hemingways, if I may say that. But, well, I do have three general questions, and I don't know much about international trade. Yet we read a lot, and the more you read, the less you understand. I call it the Funny Book magazine, but it's The Economist. I don't know if you see The Economist, comes out once a week in little vignettes around the world. It's kind of a semi-liberal outfit, but three very specific questions. One of them is, you hear about our tax policy where businesses in this country keep profits outside the country so they can't be taxed. What's your, and I'm neither for or against it, what would be the chance of not taxing those monies and having them come back in this country? So have you ever looked at the impact of that? Because they say there's billions of dollars profits done outside. Have you dealt with any of that?
I haven't really looked into it, but to me, common sense would say, we look at immigration and everything else, and every now and then you give amnesty, so to speak. I don't think we can do it and then keep doing it and then keep doing it. As a way to get the investment back in the U.S., I think if we had some kind of an amnesty program to bring money back, it might be worth it. But then we need some laws on the books that would keep companies from repeating it, knowing that they can bring it back later and not be taxed on it. I think we need to tax companies that have enough profit that they can afford to take it overseas.
This is more specific. I was talking before this group started talking with the Governor, Senator King's gentleman in the audience, and talked about down in Washington County with the Chinese mill in Washington County. And you've probably seen that. That's a rather impressive mill down there. What's your take on, I don't know if they're getting subsidies or not. What do you have any comments around the mill in Woodland, Baileyville, whichever we want to call it? It looks like a big operation there. Are they competing for fiber? What is it that the impact on you folks? Because I live 60 miles north of there, and the trucks are going by all the time, loaded with logs that are going down to Baileyville.
I've only been there once, and I have limited knowledge of what goes on in Baileyville, but I believe that they're in the process or have just added at least one new tissue machine. Tissue is one of the growing segments in the paper industry, and most of Maine that has had growth that I'm aware of has been in the tissue industry. Unfortunately, Lincoln, for instance, had a major setback when their boiler blew up, and they let their pulp mill fall apart because of it and freeze up. But the tissue industry is probably one of the bright spots. Coated paper and other printing papers are taking a big hit.
Last one also has to do with Washington County. They're talking about exporting out of Washington County, and they're talking, as you know, Millinocket, East Millinocket, or down east, what do you want to call it these days, about the torrefied wood. Do you have any inside knowledge of whether that is something that would be going forward, would have some value to the state of Maine?
I only know of it, and that they're trying to produce torrefied wood there as a substitute for like a coal type of product, I believe. But I don't know if it's viable, if it's actually worked out, and if there's an actual profit margin, or if it's a subsidized product. So I know that Millinocket in a whole has had some very bad news lately, and they're looking at ripping out one of their paper machines, I believe, in the old one in order to help pay to restart the other mill. That's all I know about it.
One time we had something called Rural Caucus, and we were fairly energetic for a while, and then they had a bunch of other caucuses that kind of killed the Rural Caucus. And I only say that because we had the folks scream before, about 15 or 20 of us who get up early in the morning. The rest of these local guys couldn't do it apparently, and we talked about the torrefied wood process about 8 years ago. And what it is, you're really making charcoal. You take, as you know, you take the wood, in effect, chip it up, heat it, and all the volatiles are burned off, and you're left with carbon that they crush into something that looks like charcoal. And what the real issue was Great Britain has like 30% of their energy must come from non-greenhouse gas stuff. And that was the sale pitch that they were going to use Millnocket for. And I don't know where that is now. So, you know, you got really, well, maybe you had some comments on that or know more about it than I do, but it's an interesting concept whether, and it would be, go out of the port down the Eastport, I guess, with the idea.
Yeah, I really don't have any more information that I could share at this time with it. The only other bright spot that I know of has been in Old Town, I believe. There's some work going on there to try to use like a black liquor type of product, which is a byproduct of making pulp, trying to use that for like a jet fuel or some kind of a diesel fuel. And I really don't know where that's advanced to yet, how successful they've been.
Basically, Mr. Chairman, I just want to let the group know that Ron is my local union president in Rumford. We have fought a good fight on the paper dumping issue, and I would say that I have been on this commission since the start, and I remember seeing the documentary Trading Democracy by Bill Moyers, in the 3 words that have changed my life forever is tantamount to expropriation. Since then, I realized that these free trade agreements done in secret with no transparency and fast track, not bringing it to Congress, debating, and giving Congress the right to amend has scared me. But the thing of it is, since I've been on this commission, every trade agreement that I've seen is looking to the harmonization of all the lowest possible standards and regulations, which scare me. But the other thing is the lowest possible standards and the highest possible level of profitability with the right to sue for potential loss of profits has moved me to such that I want to continue this process. And I thank you for bringing your comments forward.
Hey, Ron. I just want to tell you that I was aware of the dumping of the steel after we signed this, oh, not we, but after they signed the South Korean Free Trade Act. Now they're dumping all the steel. And I reached out to our delegation, and Senator King's office got back to me, and he signed on a letter, I think, with 96 other representatives and senators opposing that. So I thought that was very positive. But it shouldn't be the steel industry that has to fight this. It should absolutely be the government. They signed the deal with the South Koreans. If they're going to violate it, then it should be our government that's fighting those things. I absolutely agree with you on that. So thank you for what you do.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Anyone else testify? Seeing none, I guess we'll close that hearing. Yeah.
I think Wade has a.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Wade.
My crack staff down in the Portland office informs me that wood chips are duty-free, as are pulp. Duty-free? Yes, duty-free.
That's so interesting.
And I said, thank you so much. Outbound U.S. origin products, yes, are duty-free to the EU.
Yes,
They're good.
If there's anything more of that, I mean, if that's lumped into why that is, if it's into some other agreement or just duty free.
Just duty-free.
Huh.
Whatever is governing the tariff rates between those two.
Probably because they don't have an awful lot of fiber there.
That's a,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it just goes to the larger point about this agreement, where there's been a lot of blanket statements by the US TR about the huge economic benefit that it's going to provide sort of globally. And when you break it down, it's really not clear where that's coming from. And if indeed it's not the tariffs, then that means it's going to be in this non-tariff barrier area, which is the whole harmonization and all of the other things that we've been talking about. And so that actually heightens the concern, because it just seems that, you know, in the balance in terms of the trade-offs, that we're not getting the big bump over here in terms of additional trade, and yet there may be significant impacts on all of these other programs. So we'll see what comes from that. I wanted to just see if there were any other comments or questions people had, you know, while we're still meeting on this particular assessment, particularly for Karen and John Piatti, because they're going to go back and finalize the report based on what we're saying here today and what they've heard, and I just want to make sure we've heard everything that there is to say on it.
Just that, they made some notes on what additional information they were going to seek, and I wonder if you could reiterate what you heard from me and others that you were going to get additional information on. Because I can only half read my scrawly notes here.
Well, I may rely on Locke's notes as well on this.
Uh-oh.
But what I have is looking up some additional tariff information on particular products, for which I might also check in with Wade, since they know these things so automatically. And I think what we might do is include an appendix that has more detail on different products that are being exported and imported, and what the tariff rates are. I think adding a little more on investor-state dispute settlement and cool, particularly as those relate to labeling, which is something I hadn't really included there. And then there were a few questions for John on dairy, perhaps an appendix to talk about how that program evolved. What else do I have here? Oh, and then perhaps some more information on the organic equivalency arrangement and how disputes are handled, or how that agreement is modified moving forward. I think those are the things I heard. If I've missed something, it would be great to either know that now or by email in the next few days.
I just wanted to make comment on some of the unintended consequences. Karen and I spoke briefly before the hearing began, and just touched upon specifically some of the potential health impacts for some of the policy that's created, and how that directs trade, and how that has cultural impact on societies. And Karen, I wonder if, for the benefit of the group, you could maybe comment on a specific example of that. Some of that was in the report, but I think it's worthwhile to maybe articulate that again, if you don't mind.
A couple of years ago, we did a study to look at how the food environment available to consumers in Mexico had changed in the wake of NAFTA. And this was a peer-reviewed article that was eventually published in an academic journal. So it also forced us to be, pretty precise. And what was interesting looking at that, we know that, I think a lot of people know that corn exports to Mexico increased pretty substantially in the wake of NAFTA. But we found that it was also changes in rules on investment made a big difference, because after NAFTA passed, there was, in addition to the corn exports, and so more, which led to more beef and dairy consumption, there was a big increase in investment in fast food restaurants and supermarkets, in junk food processing, basically. And so the default food environment available to consumers shifted. It became more like the food environment in the United States. And the rate of obesity in Mexico also shifted, so that now Mexico and the United States are tied for the highest obesity rates in the world. So, I mean, I don't know that anybody had this in mind, but if you think about the logic of the trade agreements, it's about facilitating those kinds of flows without the kinds of constraints or other values that most of us would think was important. I don't know if that's happened in other places, and I'm not saying that this was the only reason this happened, but I think certainly that the dramatic increases in investments in those industries contributed to that change.
Can't restrain myself because I was lucky enough to go to a meeting in Mexico City a couple of weeks ago, and my sister came down with me because she used to live in Mexico City, and I had extra frequent flyer miles, and we were walking around, and she hasn't lived there since before NAFTA, and she said she just kept commenting on all the fast food restaurants and in the whole neighborhoods where she used to live, and said, "Oh, that wasn't there before NAFTA." I mean, she's not in my world. She teaches, she writes short stories, so she isn't like thinking about trade policy. But she knew right away. She was like, "Oh no, that was, that's because of NAFTA, And so that was so interesting to hear that you've actually done an academic study that looks at that issue. So I'm sorry, I know Pamela's next to speak, but I couldn't, or or Mike, yeah.
Mine's just real quick. I know that you put, one of the things that's been very enlightening for me today is the limiting effect that a tariff actually has, that the fluctuation in exchange rate can actually have a much greater effect on these things. And you give a little blurb in here, but I think an example would really bring that to light for people, especially where this document will hopefully have more of a life if somebody sees it. Like maybe if you could follow one of the products that you talk about, lobsters or whatever, and show how the fluctuation in the currency actually has a bigger effect.
I don't know how it plays out specifically in the case of US and EU, but I think I could certainly track that. It's been, as I think it was Ron was mentioning, currency issues have been a big issue in trade. So I can certainly add something like that.
My comment can wait, 'cause it's not so much about the report if we want to address.
Representative Hickman, was you interested in testifying, or what, you just come to listen?
I was coming to listen.
Well, glad to have you, sir.
Missed most of it.
We were feeding the hungry.
There you go. Ms. Taylor?
My comment was not so much about the report, it was just to follow up on something that I mentioned a session or two before. We've met before when we're talking about global harmonization and chemical safety and pharmaceutical safety as it relates to OSHA requirements. And under the EU agreement, it does state that the EU adheres to the global harmonization under the HASCOM communications under OSHA. But going back to what you said before, it's if they violated the treaty and it did uphold that end of the treaty, it would, OSHA would still hold the main employer liable for not adhering. And if the foreign company who is transporting the goods and a main employer purchased the goods and the chemicals or the pharmaceutical was not labeled correctly in adherence to the treaty agreement, the liability is not on that end, even if they messed up. It's the liability is going to be on the employer, and that's who OSHA would find responsible for it. So, just one other thing.
Senator Sherman?
Just like one other thing, also, I guess. I was surprised at the small amount of seed potatoes that are going into Europe. And the potato board guys who oversee all this, guy named Tim Hobbs and Don Flannery, it'd be interesting I don't know what the phone number is now, but it'd be interesting to talk to those folks, because they were some of the people that were telling me about the ban, if you will, on seed imports into Europe. And they're also the one telling me about sneaking seed into South America someplace. It's one of the farmer things that they do, I guess. So I'll try to get that phone number and probably could do that.
Get Don's phone number here, but,
It's gotta be somewhere.
yeah, well, it's probably the GMO for Europe, that's why they're, Mr. Hertz?
There are three places in the report, or the draft report, where there are recommendations. Each of those reflect a lot of the important points that I think would make for good follow-on activities for the commission. Some of them are requesting information from various places, including the negotiators. So I don't know what our plan of action is, but it seems to me that these recommendations lay out a pathway, one pathway that we can take.
Representative Treat?
The initial thinking has been that when we get the final report, and the date of that is gonna be sometime in July, I usually consider late July and August sort of the lost or maybe found months in Maine, when we are not at the legislature and perhaps doing other things. But then maybe we could schedule another meeting, perhaps sometime in early September, and use that meeting as an opportunity to go over the recommendations in more detail and make decisions about whether we want to pursue those recommendations and what might come out of the report, what we might want to do with that report. I can envision all kinds of additional meetings, including, like, for example, the dairy issue. I mean, I could see the commission sitting down or on the phone with the the ag negotiator of this agreement and having a really interesting discussion. So I think there's a lot that could come out of that. So that would be my recommendation. I don't know if we can get a quorum at that time, but if we could, it would be a good time to do it, I think.
Probably push for a little earlier in September for reasons, but.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people have campaigns to deal with, so the, sort of on the early side, I know that Locke is away that first week of September, so looking preliminarily, we can send out an email, but if folks could think about maybe the second week of September, which starts on the 8th, I believe. I don't know if people think they're gonna be around that week, but that's looking,
Going the other way,
what's that?
as far as August.
Oh, August? Well, I don't think that's gonna work. Yeah. I would like to be here. And, yeah. Well, actually, the last week of August,
I was thinking.
before Labor Day, yeah, I don't know if that works for other people, though. But the week of the 25th, that's another possibility. I don't know if, Locke, if you're around that week? That works for you? So the week of the 25th, is that an option for people?
It's a great week.
Okay, that's a great week. All right, well, maybe we can send out an email and we'll take a look. I have some all-day meetings that week, but there's other days that look good. And while we're on that meeting, I wanted to mention that I had sent an email to both Locke and to Troy, and I actually just got an email during the meeting asking whether we're thinking of looking into this. My recommendation, in addition to this follow-on to the report, is there's a whole nother trade agreement that we have not discussed, that is not in the public domain, that was just leaked on WikiLeaks this week, which is called the Trade and Services Agreement. It is a huge proposed agreement that the U.S. Trade Representative is now negotiating with a whole bunch of countries. And it essentially puts rules that we now already have in manufacturing, say under NAFTA, on every other type of service. So you're talking banking rules, you're talking licensing of doctors, you're talking, let me look around the room, lawyer services. So all of these things are covered. So it had occurred to me that this is something we better find out about so that we can say something about it. And I happen to have been at a meeting where there is a very informed, social scientist, academic from Canada who's done an excellent paper on this already, who might be willing to be at least on the telephone with us, and he's written an initial paper on the subject from the Canadian point of view, but it's very similar, and might be a good guest speaker to have. I've actually heard him give a presentation on energy policy and trade agreements, and he was very clear. So in the trade area, that's always something that's hard to find with some of these folks. But I know, Mike, you wanted to follow up.
It's not quite on the main topic, but it's certainly related. I would like to have a better understanding of, number one, the dispute resolution process and how it works, but more importantly, the track record. I mean, we've got, God knows how many trade negotiations have been completed, and agreements are out there. There must be somebody that is tracking how the disputes that have been raised, how they've been resolved. I mean, it's very bothersome because, as I understand the mechanism, there are these, in most of them, there are these three-person boards, and I don't know who they represent other than themselves and the law firms they work for, but I don't have the kind of understanding that would be useful in terms of, you go to all this trouble of negotiating this stuff, and if the dispute resolution process doesn't amount to much, what have you accomplished?
Yeah, well, actually, on that point, the person I was thinking of inviting, is a guy named Scott Sinclair, and he's written about exactly that, and in part because he got involved, there was a challenge, the province of Ontario passed rules around the selling of electricity from renewable energy. And it's something called feed-in tariff, which is one of those wonky terms, but if you're on the Energy Committee, you already know all this. But those of us who aren't, it's about being able to sell energy back into the grid. And they had rules that promoted local procurement so that they could build up their renewable energy businesses locally, jobs, you know. And those rules were challenged in one of these dispute resolution processes. So he's written on that as well, and that's what I heard him talk about, and it was very much about that process. So I think he would be a really good person to talk about both how that dispute resolution process works, what some of the experience has been around the world with that, and then also talk a bit about the TISA, or Trade and Services Agreement. So if the commission was, you know, interested in that, I think it would fit together really well.
Absolutely. It sounds like people on Wall Street
Lloyd
don't want
has
to
a-
be regulated.
No.
Just a couple of kind of comments or reactions to what you just said. One, I know that there's, I think, at least 2 articles on TISA that are going to be part of the customary article summary that I prepare for the commission, and you'll be getting that soon. So there's at least 2 articles about what Representative Treat just spoke about. And secondly, perhaps if you decide on a date in, let's say, the last week in August, we could initiate invitation
Yep.
to Mr. Sinclair, was that his name?
Yeah, Scott Sinclair.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe-
we could get that in motion now, if
Well,
you could decide
it might
on
depend
a
on whether he
date.
can come.
Well, yeah, but my point is, if the sooner that you decide on this, the better the chances that we could
Get him
get a
here.
date for him.
What about some could we come up with, you know, maybe more than one day so that, okay, so,
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't-
good anywhere in that August.
Well,
I don't
I'm-
have much to do right now.
I'm looking at Monday or Wednesday or Friday for me.
Can you
The
give me
other-
the dates on that?
25th, 27th, or 29th of August.
Yeah. So,
25th,
are any of those out for anybody else? 29th is out, okay. So the 25th or the 27th, Monday or Wednesday?
okay. And then I could, to follow up, I could get the contact
Yep.
information from you?
Yeah.
Okay.
For some, yeah. I'd probably, if I had a preference, I'd probably say Monday, but if it really doesn't matter, if Monday doesn't work, I'll do Wednesday.
Okay, we'll see what we can get lined up. All right, so.
Sounds
what
good.
Any other business?
Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank our guests Karen Hansen-Kuhn and John Piotti for undertaking this large task, the assessment. I would say, as a former chair of this commission, the amount of time, energy, and effort put into one of these documents is immense, and the commission, as co-chair Representative Treat has said, our budget is very limited, and I know the value of this document to the Citizens Trade Policy Commission and to the citizens of the state of Maine and to like-minded entities throughout the world is extremely valuable, and I just want to take this time, at least on my behalf and on behalf of the commission, thank you both for at least a job well done up to this point. We look forward to seeing the finished product. Thank you very much.
You're on probation.
I would say,
Thank you very much.
well
Appreciate it.
said. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll, Locke will be in touch about, more dates. People feel comfortable one or the other. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, bang.
Thank you all.